So if you have anybody that wants to get in touch with ASEAC, please refer them to the asac.mail@gmail.com. It's a great way to get in touch with us. That's an old slide. Tonight's agenda, introductions and public comments. I'm going to start with following up on outstanding items. This is something we're adding this year, so we had a couple of data requests previously that Paul's provided us some information on and can present a little bit. We have one unscheduled thing in here, we'll just handle that up front as well. The school board is going to vote on 2 new policies, or updates to policies next week, and they want to run by all of the committees, so we'll take a look at 2 of them tonight, and then either approve or disapprove as far as our recommendation goes. And our topic tonight is diploma options, that will leave some time for discussion, and then we're going to talk a little bit about ASEAC subcommittees and kind of how we're going to go forward from there. And before we begin, I have just 2 admin things. We are, for the sake of saving us some time and being respectful of everybody's time, we've asked the therapeutic rec and the Parent Resource Center just email us their updates. Those updates will go out with our meeting notes. We think that'll reach more people than just presenting them to the people that are in attendance at the meetings typically. One of those things, though, that is kind of important, I just encourage you to share this, so I will pull this slide up here. This is the therapeutic rec office update. Quincy Park Playground grand opening is this Saturday at 1 p.m., so that's November 19th. I don't know if anybody was involved in the planning for the park there, but it's now a fully accessible and adapted park. It's pretty amazing. So if you have anybody that's interested, I'd encourage you to go over and check out the grand opening. It should be a good time. Just the first, I'm just going to pull the stuff you sent me an email there. This is the table I just put together. Our first kind of follow-up previously was some data had been presented at 2 meetings ago about the pass rates for SOLs with respect to Virginia, and then with respect to students with disabilities and how APS compared across the board for different subject areas. So Paul pulled this data together. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Sure.
And then I'll open it up for public comment and everything like that afterwards.
Sure. So 2 meetings ago, we displayed several different information items, and there were some line graphs that showed, I believe that they showed science, social studies, reading, and math. Like say, for example, science was all of the different science SOL exams averaged together for the pass rates. It had Virginia, and it had APS, and then it had several different subgroups, including students with disabilities. And one of the questions that came back was, what about, one of the things that was not represented was students with disabilities in Virginia, in the entire state. So I created a table using data points. And so, for example, science, in the first line is 2014. The average pass rate for all science SOL exams by all students in Virginia was 80% in 2014. Steadily each year, 15 and 16, it went up slightly. The next column, students with disabilities in Virginia scored significantly below the overall average, but there was a slight upward trend in that. Arlington Public Schools, all students is typical for the trend in that category. Arlington typically scores above the state in general, and Arlington students with disabilities rate at passing for science SOL exams also went up, and our students with disabilities taking SOL exams was greater than the statewide average of students with disabilities. The chart pretty much indicates a similar pattern for all of the different areas, social studies, reading, and mathematics. So one of the areas of concern is that when we take a look at all students in general, our students with disabilities are typically not passing at the rate as most typical or general students. However, students with disabilities, there is an upward trend. That was one of the things that we wanted to try to take notice of. The goal would be to continue that upward trend, and that we are are generally doing better than the state average, which is also a positive takeaway, but there clearly is a lot of room for improvement because it's well below the statewide and the APS general average. So that's, so comparing Arlington students with disabilities to Virginia students with disabilities was the one data point that was not in the charts previously. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions, or if I'm not able to answer it, I can try to get the information back to you if there was any other question or comment. Donna?
And I realized this was a transition item, but like, I had a teacher and a parent call me like right before the math SOL last year because they had switched to that computer adaptive, and I've already had more people asking me about it this year. So I don't know, I never found out, Wendy, what you found out, but the concern is, and just for the background, and I think that it was the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math SOL went from kind of more the paper-based SOL to the computer adaptive, so the kids get one question at a time, and you can't jump around. And so you answer that one question depending on if it's right or wrong. It's a progressive thing, so if you miss it, they'll give you an easier question. And if you get it right, they'll give you a harder question. Then all the questions somehow get weighted so they can still figure out pass, fail, and all the scoring in between. But the teacher that worked with a student with disabilities, the concern that they raised to me was, we don't test our children this way in the normal course of business. You know, we give the kids a piece of paper, and then if they kind of forgot how to do this, they can move forward, or they can go back and correct and change. And they predicted that the kids wouldn't do as well with the computer adaptive testing.
So I think there are, I don't know, I don't want to jump in on top of, I had a couple of thoughts.
Well, I was gonna say, all I found out was that you can't go back and forth, that it is the one
Right.
recommendation, that apparently there had been at the state level a lot of research and consideration into that process, so that for a student, for example, who might feel overwhelmed, there's some, I guess, thinking or evidence that you're not gonna be as overwhelmed if you're a student who maybe is not gonna be able to demonstrate mastery on a lot of items. You won't be forced to go through all of the items to your computer.
I guess it wouldn't be as intimidating because it adjusts to you, but I know that they're also doing it with the reading this year too.
So I think that, you know, Paul may have more up to date, but I think that is likely to be kind of a trend because it's more responsive to individual
Right.
students, and with all the capacities of, you know, computers and computer administered testing and
Right.
things like that. I'm sure there are pros and cons, and like oftentimes when you have a new thing like that, we'll have to learn how to prepare for that a little differently perhaps, but I didn't get much farther than that to find
Yeah.
out.
I guess I just, you know, I know that when you're sitting there and you're going through your IEP and you're deciding what state accommodations, the emphasis is always like, it should be how the child takes the test in their normal course of business. And so I saw this as a complete opposite philosophy to that. And so I don't know how many parents realized that their kids were going from, you know, what is typically like testing paper-based.
I believe there was computer administered math prior to that, because I remember a lot of conversation
With
about
SOLs?
manipulatives, you know.
Well, my son's taking a lot of his math tests on his iPad right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
just in
A
the
lot of
normal
them.
course of business?
The normal course of business, of
Yeah.
course, they're taking them 3 class periods to finish,
But
but
then
I think that messes up.
there's still a paper and pencil version of the SOL.
But you have to apply for that as an accommodation.
Yes, absolutely. So I think-
And that's the thing that I don't think that parents realized.
Yeah. So, I mean, is your question though, like about pass rates prior to the implementation of
Well,
the?
I guess it was like an old item that I just wanted to make sure that we kind of discussed as a table, because I think that the people need to be more aware that all of the tests are going to be, you know, if your child is having trouble passing the SOL, it could just be because the format is so different than what they typically do.
So I would like to address a couple of items. The first one is that if an IEP team, including family, recommends that a student should take their SOL exam paper and pencil in the more traditional format, which probably IEP team should be able to determine what may work best. And for example, if a student is struggling in math and the way that it's appearing on the screen or with the math manipulatives, it may be that an IEP team may determine that for math SOL exam, it might be paper and pencil, but for other SOL exams, that the online format is acceptable. Each student may have their own unique needs, and you know your child best. However, I would add that it's true that when we go to test a student, we want to test a student using conditions similar to the way that a student is instructed. Just like we wouldn't want to introduce any new accommodation to a student just for the SOL exam. We want to be able to have a student participate in the SOL exam in a manner similar to how they're doing day-to-day instruction, because most grade levels now have individualized learning devices, either iPads or MacBook Air laptops. Most of the teachers should be designing lessons that have opportunities for online practice and SOL simulations in their day-to-day instruction. And the first time they encounter one of those online test format, they should already have had lots of experience engaging with that type of instructional environment before the test.
And I know you guys are both high school, but would you say that most of the tests that you take are on computer now, or paper-based? This Yorktown and HB, or paper-based or computer?
Well, like in just regular classes? Or like
Yeah.
paper?
Paper?
But I also think that raises a good point, like, even if they were computer-based and you practiced on them, I doubt they're using the adaptive questioning on the practice. Meaning, like, even if we give it on a computer, right now it's probably you can go through and go back and check answers and everything like that. I think, yeah, that's an interesting point, like, you can't go back. I'm sure we don't practice it that makes sense.
It's just one question at a time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
miss it or you get it right.
We can take a look and get a little bit more information about the adaptive nature of the online testing, but I would emphasize that if the family has a concern, they should.
I don't know how a parent would even know in an IEP meeting to even ask that question. It would what?
It would have to be brought up, I think.
Right.
Yes.
They would have no clue about that.
Right.
Yeah, specifically, I think to the point that the testing should be in the same environment that they're taught at. I think it's probably IEP teams to address that, because not every parent's probably aware.
Well, and the fact that more SOLs are kind of going in that format, and I take it that it's because they can ask less questions to test mastery, because the complaint was that the SOLs were lasting too long. And so now with the computer adaptive, they're only giving you 25 questions now as opposed to 40, is that right? So the number of questions has reduced, which take less time because there's so much criticism of SOLs.
It's only 25 questions.
Yeah, but if somebody makes a dumb mistake, then now they're
You're
locked
screwed.
out of a harder question that they might have gotten right.
Exactly.
I
And
mean,
that's why,
There-
That's
You
concerning.
can read more about it, I think, go to the DPOE website, because the way they just, I mean, it does sound alarming at first, but when I read about it, I felt better, because it's not just like one and done, you're out, you got that wrong, you know, the way they describe it is much more dynamic than that, and, you know, so if you miss one, it might go to an easier level and work up again, and then, you know, if you don't just miss one, kind of, it's dynamic. So I would really encourage people to look at it, but it's interesting in a way, you know.
but no parent is gonna know that.
Right, no, it's just responding to the protocol.
Yeah, yeah.
The reaction.
So I think it's a good thing for us to investigate and be able to bring back more information, because it is fairly new.
Are all the teachers, special case carriers aware of this?
And that's who brought it to me.
Because I think most case carriers and most teachers want their kids to pass, and so they'll bring it up in an IEP meeting, but it's even more important that they know about this, and
Right.
that's the concern for me.
It comes out through superintendent's memos, and then also our planning and evaluation, because, you know, to administer all the SOLs, we have to plan how many kids, what computer, you know, rooms, how are we doing it, so I would think we should check with the planning and evaluation to ask them about how they're preparing people to administer it, or, you know.
Because I would comment to the case carriers, so for example, if we did our IEP back in late June, so we're set for next year's, it's irrelevant for me personally, but if we're set for next year's IEP and we already have our accommodations in place based on the old model, then some of these case carriers need to stop and think through their student loads and figure out if they have students that they need to test differently.
Because it was just the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade math that switched, and so, you know, I don't see a drop. Actually, there's a 2% increase between 15 and 16, which is good, but if you were to look at the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, I think that when I looked at it, they all dropped. Like our percentage of pass rates dropped in APS,
It would
and the
be-
state.
With these data points, all math, which would include.
Right, third through
fifth,
12th.
Sixth, seventh, eighth,
Yeah, or
and
whatever.
various high school ones are all blended together. So we have to go and, look at the VDLB website and maybe pull that unique one apart. For these years, it did indicate, continuously upward trends, except for the Virginia students with disabilities actually went down in 2016. That may have been, something, unique to certain other areas in the state.
Oh, for the math, between
So,
15
yeah,
and
for the
16,
math,
yeah, it fell 8 points.
In this column, there were 43, 48, but then it went down to 40, which is an unusual drop. Overall, Virginia went up, APS went up, and then it stayed the same, it did not continue to go up. Students with disabilities in Arlington did have a continuously upward trend. So, I think there's more that we can get, about that, and it is a good question to see, is the, adaptive nature of the online testing, is that gonna be explored in other subject areas as well? And I don't know the answer to that, but we can certainly
I
find
heard that
out.
it's happening for reading this year. I just heard that last week.
But I wonder if there are two issues. There's taking a test on a computer, which is a new venue,
Format.
and across the country, everywhere, every state. There, Park in DC and almost every state is having massive disruptions because of this shift. Because there are students who don't use computers like at APS a lot of the time, and then do on the assessments. So states are having huge problems. So there's the format, computer versus paper, and then there's the question of psychometricians and adaptive and non-adaptive, which I tend to be persuaded by your points that they go down, they go up, they test you, they seek to test you on grade level and eventually it's valid. I just think, this is an issue that's probably worth pursuing because I think that you get into either two camps. Suck it up and be tough and do the hard educational learning to be 21st century, or be kind to kids and let them take tests in a format that's gonna work, and neither camp is gonna serve kids the best. And so I feel like would help us to be persistent on this issue, because that's the way we're gonna have tests that reflect actually what kids are learning during the year.
I mean, if you're passing, to me, it doesn't matter if you pass with a 410 or a 500. It doesn't matter, but if you're borderline, if that computer adaptive made a difference between you passing and failing, like, that's big.
Can they do a retake in paper if they find that they failed? Is that an option?
So if a student does not pass, at the high school level, or for courses where it would count as a verified credit for graduation, multiple retakes can be offered.
But in paper, can they automatically make that the option if that's causing the problem?
In theory, it could be. The thing is that, typically, schools are not ordering large batches of the paper tests. And usually when we do an expedited retake, if a student scores just, a small amount below the passing, we usually wanna give them some quick remediation or get them in for expedited retake within a couple of days in the testing window. There may or may not be time to order, the paper test to get to the school.
Well, it's more than ordering, it's like having an IEP meeting to approve an accommodation.
Well, and to discuss accommodations,
Right,
right?
yeah.
And to figure out what was behind the
Right.
issue, is it that, what is it, and then make an informed recommendation
Right.
for an accommodation for them. I mean, even though we, may feel our reactions, students might have their own individual reactions. And the other thing about the online test is the rapid response in terms of if you passed or not. When you do a paper, you have to send it to
Right.
the state and it has to come back. So I
Right.
mean, I just think that, especially for high school students, involving them and what works for them and what do we need to support them. I do think it is the wave of the future. And for those kids who just need a little bit of support to be comfortable and to be successful, we should go that way when we can. Not that every student is gonna be there, but those that can, So.
I mean, I don't know that other folks have thoughts, but I just wanna say thank you for bringing this data back, and I confidently suggested that we were not doing better than the rest of the state, because I was so concerned about the numbers that we have shown that aren't where we wish they were with all students. But I do think it's just obvious from the numbers that we are performing far better, almost half the gap between students without learning challenges and students with, we're just doing far better than the rest of the state. And I think since I wildly asserted that we weren't, I probably should thank you particularly for that.
But there's still room for growth.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have one question about the data overall for Virginia. Do you know enough about how the data differs in the different geographic areas of the state?
'Cause this
For
is
students with
everybody.
disabilities, I mean, is Arlington, in comparison to counties in this area, kind of on par? Are we higher, lower, and looking at other parts of the state? How do we compare? Do you know the data well enough to be able to speak to that?
I do not, however, all of this is publicly available on the VDOE website, and you can, there is a page where you can click on, school report cards, and then school division report cards, and you can get information by school or by school division. So if you wanted to compare Arlington to Fairfax, you can pull up the Fairfax, scores, and then look at them. Basically, I think there's 100 and something divisions in the state, and you could look, I don't think they have it arranged by, regions, but each school division does have its own separate data, and then the statewide as a whole.
And we used this same website last year to do the kind of our state of students with disabilities, and all of that, we just ran out of time to do the SOLs by grade level. But I did do a how-to for parents. I'll send it back out as a PDF of how to actually use the website, export the data to Excel, so you can manipulate it, do fancy charts and all that, so I'll resend that with the minutes. Because it's not necessarily intuitive, it's a great system.
It's not easy.
And everything's literally there, sorry, everything is literally there, it's just, you really gotta know what buttons to click to get it out there.
Do you guys know if the SOL data is on that, what is that called, the WABI, the Washington Area Board, whatever that report is, because that's out there on the website where it compares us to the 5 districts, Montgomery County, Prince George's, Fairfax, Loudoun. But it compares a lot of statistics, from how many school board members to what the average teacher's salary is to the class sizes. Like, do
Yeah.
they put SOL scores on there too?
I don't know if SOL scores, but the lobby looks at the whole Washington area region, which includes
Right.
Maryland and DC.
Right.
And SOL scores are unique to Virginia, so if they
Right.
did, it would only be looking at some of the Northern Virginia, I think they might.
We would have their
look at
equivalent standardized
data
test in
points that
Maryland.
are universal across all of the jurisdictions. I do know that we have a variety of data that's on.
It might be
on
worth
record
looking
by-
at.
Unlikely because we chose not to do common core, so our assessments are not equivalent for these.
I think Virginia says that SOLs are higher than.
Virginia's got a great,
Whether they actually, that claim is true or not, but they.
unique sense of pride.
So, anything else on this particular topic? I did wanna, that slide popped up in my slide set, so we kinda jumped ahead. Paul has some more, info, some other